Hello and welcome to Ars Electronica 2021. It's Friday and we are starting our symposium day with the super nice and big symposium organized, curated and brought to us by the Branch magazine. This is a premiere, so to say. We were extremely happy and delighted to meet these people and have the chance to basically hand over the whole Friday Symposium into their responsibility. And this, of course, didn't come by chance. There are several things that really step by step led to this wonderful opportunity. First of all, they were awarded this year with a brand new award of Prix Ars Electronica, the special award for digital humanity, which is a collaboration with the Austrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And it's all about to recognize achievements, how the digital world can actually really take care about society, take over responsibilities and support the positive developments of societal problems, issues and questions. And the Branch magazine is a wonderful online magazine with an extremely interesting, strong community worldwide with experts from all the different areas ranging from art, design, architecture, into sociology, into sciences, informatics, and all these areas. So a typical example of how we believe that nowadays a broad spectrum of experts, new alliances, might be even the only chance that we have to really be able to tackle the big problems that are looming above our heads. And this, of course, is a very important issue for Ars Electronica since 1979, because some of you might know, 42 years ago, Ars Electronica was started already as a festival for art, technology and society, with the very visionary idea at this time that the collaboration between art and technology might actually be a wonderful and strong instrument to include also the society at large, but also individuals and humans into this process of developing our future. Well, one could say it didn't help so much because this was 40 years ago, and we know that 40 years ago there were already a lot of information about the problems of climate change and that our industrial world is more and more ruining the planet. Here we are now 42 years later, and it's not only that we still have the same problem, we are now in the situation that this problem is really accelerating and really became almost already in a state of disaster. So the question always will remain whether the contribution of creative people, whether the artistic perspectives are really able to change something, are really able to contribute to transformation into new directions. And this alone probably would be a topic for a whole festival. But I think anyway, we have no other chance. There is this very wonderful saying, it's anyway too late to be a pessimist, so okay, let's go and start action. And I think this is exactly what the people from Branch magazine are doing. They are starting the action. They are not starting it in terms of it will come. They already did so, and they have already really wonderful achievements. And of course, in the question of the big, or with the impression of the big problem of the climate catastrophe and climate crisis looming above our heads, one also might ask, why are you still always talking about this digital transformation? Shouldn't you talk only about the big thing with a festival like Ars Electronica? And yes, that's a very good point. But then again, I think if we are not able to solve and to master the very big question of digital transformation, which is how to save democracy, how to make sure that the societies on our planet who are now going into these really difficult decades ahead of us, that they are not based on a participatory, accessible form of government and governance. If we are not able to establish maybe also new types of democracy that help us to get into this constant process of negotiation, we won't be able at all to tackle any of these problems. And one of the very important things, of course, is to change the perspectives from our usually typically Western-oriented, European or United States-oriented way of, well, we know how things are working and now we explain it to everybody. Just very recently with the disaster of the exodus of Afghanistan, again, we recognize that the idea that just because we are mighty and we have big weapons and a lot of money, that based on this we can deliver our wisdom into the world is really a matter of the past. This is no longer working. And this really opens up a whole wealth, a very big hole in front of us also, with so many questions and problems that we barely can answer. It needs a very intensive research and investigation of what could be actually strategies in this global digital world to come to procedures. And I think the foremost thing is to develop strategies and procedures for these ongoing negotiations that we need to lead to compromises that can actually be accepted by all the people on this planet. And this is almost, just speaking it, all the people on the planet, you probably, but on the other side, I think we cannot keep us apart, and we really have to go into this direction. This is actually the big thing when we talk this year about the new digital deal. Not a deal in terms of, hey, who can cut the best profit and what's the best killer product for my startup or these kind of things, but really deal in terms of getting into action. How can we deal with the problems and how can we deal with each other? This, I think, is a very important point, and you will see throughout these days, throughout this wonderful symposium, that our guests from the Branch magazine, and this is a long list, and I think Michelle and Chris will introduce them people properly and much better than I can do. So for me now, it's a very big pleasure to ask Michelle Thorne and Chris Adams here on stage. They are, for me, the masterminds behind the Branch magazine. I know it's always difficult with these big communities. There are many people involved, but at least without the two of you, we wouldn't have this nice symposium and this great symposium today. So please take over your position here in front of this audience. Thank you very much, and also congratulations again to the Award for Digital Humanity.
Thank you. Good morning. Hello, thank you so much, Ars Electronica. Welcome to the Branch Magazine Symposium. Hello, Linz. Hello, Internet. My name is Michelle Thorne, and this is Chris Adams. We're the editors of Branch Magazine, and we are your hosts for today. I wanted to just start by acknowledging we are in a pandemic. This pandemic is affecting people very differently around the world, just like the climate crisis is. Thank you for the people online who are joining and watching. You have the luxury of face muting or doing your laundry at different points, but also to extend a huge thank you for the people who are here in the room. We really appreciate you being here. It'll be a great pleasure to get into the day with you, but we thought to start us off, one of the important aspects as Gerhard was mentioning, is that these crises are not going to take one or two of us, it's going to take all of us. And so if you would bear with me for a cheesy thing as I invite you to maybe turn and talk to your neighbor, respectfully with distance, and say hello, what brings you here. And if you're online, maybe you can even post or chat, say hello, where you're from, for just a few minutes to say hello and start the day.
Would you be so kind as to cue me in?
Yeah. So thank you for saying hello, and it's wonderful to see you all. And Chris, maybe you can tell us a little bit about why we're here.
Why are we here today? Okay, so we're here because we, and I imagine some of you, are digital professionals who live and work on the internet. And we believe the internet should be a kind of global public resource. We think it should be fossil-free, open, and accessible to all, and in service to the diverse needs of basically everyone everywhere. But at the same time, we're also in a climate crisis, and we think the internet can actually be a very useful lever in helping us steer society away from basically heading towards that iceberg in a kind of figurative sense. But right now, the internet is the largest coal-powered machine on Earth, and that means that we're accelerating towards that kind of iceberg of climate oblivion. Now, when I talk about the internet being a coal-fired machine, or coal-powered machine, I sometimes get a few questions or kind of puzzled looks. And I want to share with you a mental model that might help you think about this, because lots of the time when we talk about the internet, we think about it in terms of cloud or things which are ethereal or there being almost no impact. I think a mental model that I want to share with you that is actually useful is to think of it a little bit like shipping, or the shipping industry. So think about that. It's essential infrastructure for modern life. It's a backbone of our globalized society, and a huge percentage of our goods and the kind of come on containerized ships now. This changes the kind of access we have to global goods. And if you think about how our shops are stocked with all these wonders from around the world, this is like, I think that this is comparable to the kind of cornucopia of delights that the internet can provide. But that's not the whole story, and we often forget about how, say, that industry might be powered. Ships that deliver the majority of our stuff, they are running on the nastiest, dirtiest fuel imaginable. This stuff is called like bunker fuel. It's the cheapest, dirtiest fuel left over when you get oil out of the ground. Now imagine something like a kind of the diesel that might go into a truck. Now, because we're talking about ships, imagine something which is where the engine is the size of a house, and this kind of fuel is like a thick goop that is basically the stuff you would scrape from the bottom of an oil barrel. Now, this stuff is a solid at room temperature, and it's so full of nasty stuff that a single ship, it can deliver all these wonderful things, but it can also pollute as much as a whole town. And I think that, and there's also a kind of more direct human toll. If you think about the nasty jobs that happen when people have to kind of take apart ships, or if you think about how that massive shipping container Ever Given and how it stopped global trade, when it was unblocked, there was a human toll because all these other people, all the people who were on there, they were totally left behind and forgotten. They were stuck on that ship for weeks after we'd all forgotten about it. And I think that this model, we can apply some of these ideas to think about the internet itself. So again, the shipping industry and tech industry, or the internet, has roughly a similar kind of carbon footprint. So these are comparable, like 1 to 3% of the world's emissions. Also, think about the language that we might use in the kind of digital world. We talk about shipping a product. We talk about containerizing programs. There's even a program literally called Docker, right? And there's also a human cost. You can think about the toxic byproducts of a global economy enabled by this particular industry. Think of the people radicalized by climate denial. Think of the insidious influence of climate delay and how that shapes our discourse. Think of the hidden labor dealing with the electronics at the end of their life. And think of like the pollution of the kind of public discourse that we have. And think of all the kind of trauma that people have to deal with when they're dealing with all the kinds of other moderating issues. And I think some of these issues are similar to how we think about the internet. I think you can think about the internet as something which is, it runs on, right now, it's primarily running on coal. And this is the cheap, nasty fuel, which has lots of the same kind of impacts. And I think that this is actually useful. Like, these things are key to our society, but they have a social and environmental cost. And we need to move away from this to something which is basically more sustainable and more just. And the rate at which this happens is important. In our terms, we say speed is justice. And I'll hand over to Michelle now to talk a little bit more about the idea of a fossil-free internet.
Yeah, thank you. So, what do we want? We want a fossil-free internet by 2030. We think it's possible, but we need all of us to help do it. So right now, as Chris was saying, the internet is under threat of being a polluting and brittle monoculture. We're also seeing big tech consolidating its power and control of our online lives. And so part of this vision is also acknowledging that power and that consolidation. And so as we see the climate crisis intensifying, more floods, more fire, more hardship, we're also seeing that this destructive default we have is not serving us really anymore. Many of us, like myself and Chris, we grew up loving the internet, but we're finding this dissonance right now. You know, the planet is on fire, and the internet is contributing to that. So what are we going to do about it?
And I guess this is what we're here today for, to actually discuss. You can think about this Branch Symposium as a continuation of what we did with Branch magazine here. So Branch Magazine came out of an online community called climateaction.tech, which was full of people like me, like Michelle, like I imagine a lot of you, who are trying to do something to address this dissonance and basically try and come up with something more positive. We kind of see things like the kind of cyberpunk future, and rather than seeing it like a manual that we should follow and implement, we want to see it like a warning that we could maybe move away from. And we think that there's actually space to ask more interesting questions and how do we replicate what we see in Blade Runner, right? We want to ask questions like, how can the internet solve our collective liberation and ecological sustainability? We can say, how can we shift the aesthetic around like the future of tech or of technology and expand this conversation to be more systemic, to be more aware of some of the root causes for this? We can think about how can we end up with a future that's more solar punk than cyberpunk. And we launched Branch Magazine as a practice of kind of collective imagination to look through this stuff. The goal was to hear from the kind of folks who work at Microsoft and Amazon, but also hear from the folks from the Amazon, because you need to have more than one person in the room here. You need to have a multitude of different voices to explore a problem this wicked and this complex. And this is the thing we were trying to do. We wanted to connect the discourse around sustainability and technology to the root causes and inequalities experienced by a number of different intersections, from like gender, for race, class, ability, and so on. And the thing is, creating this kind of change requires all kinds of practices. You need art and design, professional development, civic participation, policy, you name it, it goes on. And this is what we started with Branch Magazine, and what we're looking to do with this symposium today, to take that format and expand it into the event that you are all part of right now. And I thank you for joining. And I'll hand over to you, Michelle, for the last bits.
Yeah, so we know there's no right way or single way to really look at these issues, and we know that whatever we're doing today is incomplete, but we see it as an essential step. We also know that we need more voices and people that don't look like Chris or I, and we also want to be in conversation and learn from one another from a place of vulnerability and of care, but also of optimism and purpose. So with that spirit, we've invited some really wonderful people to help us curate the event and come and bring their perspectives and their communities. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of what is in store today at the Branch Magazine Symposium. So this morning, after we're done, we'll have a little break, and there'll be a panel held on solarpunk and other worlds, hosted by Christine Lariviere. And she's a climate change communications professional and an amateur naturalist. And she's going to be joined by the artist and software engineer Sarah Friend, as well as Jay Springett, who's a consultant strategist and an admin for the solarpunk.net. And unfortunately, Luisa Prado, she is unable to join us today. But the solarpunk panel is really going to be looking more, what does this kind of courageous and pragmatic movement offer to us? How can it help us find a way towards a more sustainable and just world? Then after the lunch break, we're going to come back to have a panel around intercitizenships and the internets of solidarity and care. That's going to be hosted by Andreas Colmenares of IM Institute and the IM Internet and the Billion Seconds Institute. And he'll be joined by Eliza Angwaye, an editor of CNN's As Equals, and Felipe Castablanco, an artist and initiator of the Parasite School, as well as Pia Mancini, the co-founder and CEO of Open Collective. And they're going to be talking about how do we cultivate this shared sense of identity and also responsibility to planet Earth, and what does this concept of intercitizenship, which the Billion Seconds Institute started to coin, what does this intercitizenship mean? Then after that, we'll have our last panel, our last topic panel called Climate Change, Education, and the Internet, hosted by Alexandra Deschamps-Sonsino of the Low Carbon Design Institute. And she'll be joined by David Jennings of XR Academy and Anshuma Bampa from Teradu, as well as Louisa Harding from the Carbon Literacy Project. And they're going to be talking about how is the internet disrupting climate change education, and what are the opportunities and pitfalls of using the internet as a place to gather information and build knowledge, as well as communities of practice and action. Then we'll be closing out our day with a reflection from the different sessions, as well as a closing keynote from Renata Avila, who's the co-founder of Progressive International and on the advisory board of Creative Commons. And she'll be asking, so this new digital deal, for whom, by whom, who's enforcing it, what does this mean, and where does it take us? And after that, we'll invite you to join us at the award ceremony from the Ars Electronica. There's also an exhibition on, which you can see throughout the weekend as well, where we are featuring some of Branch Magazine's work, as well as the Museum of the Fossilized Internet, a tiny miniature museum that talks about some of these issues in a kind of craftivist way. And there's also a workshop from one of our collaborators, Tom Jarrett, on designing sustainable digital products. And hopefully you've brought a zine. We have a printed version of the magazine as well. And that's what we have in store for you. So I think today we're really excited to be hearing from all these different internet practitioners about how they're really shifting the narratives around what is desirable and what is possible. And you'll see that there are some very direct actions you can take, like shifting your website to run on renewables, but there's also these really deeper systemic change, and that is the thing we really want to concentrate and center our practice on. So we really want to get to understanding what are these underlying structural issues that are causing the climate crisis, causing the consolidation of power of the internet, and basically exacerbating these inequalities. And we really today want to focus on going beyond tech solutionism and more towards intersectional climate justice. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll have a short break and then have the next panel on solarpunk. So thank you all so much, and great to have you here.
Yes.